Welcome to the ODDSBREAKER'S #1 place for shared sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 23 of 2021. Jordan, I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at the ODDSBREAKERS and follow us on social media / the ODDSBREAKERS. This episode is being brought to you by mybookie.ag. For a 200% sign-up bonus, please visit MyBookie. Use the promo code ODDS200. Terms, conditions, and location apply. If you'd like to help us out with our cost sponsor, the website and the podcast, we'd love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For $24.99 a month, you can get my premium plays before the line moves. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. My friends, we have a fantastic show for you today because David Bearman from ESPN is coming on to break down his thoughts on the Sweet 16. Can't wait to get him on. I am also going to talk a little bit about UFC 260 in the main event where Stipe Miocic is going to be fighting Francis Ngannou. So, very excited about that fight. And I think it's actually a pretty decent card itself. So, lots going on this weekend in sports wagering. Of course, baseball is going to be coming up. The ODDSBREAKERS, we're going to be giving out our normal free plays, and we're going to continue to give out premium plays to our premium subscribers. Before David comes on to break down the Sweet 16, I probably should talk a little bit about Andy Dalton. And you guys know I'm a Bears fan. I mean, look, here's the deal. How much is Russell Wilson really worth? I mean, I hear the Bears offered like 3 first-round draft picks and maybe Khalil Mack or somebody. Right? I mean, there's got to be a point where you can get a great player, but you're just screwing yourself for the years to come, and you're not going to have the backup to win a title anyway. Right? I mean, the best teams are built through the draft. Let's face it. For the most part. I mean, the most ideal situation is to win on a rookie quarterback contract. Probably not going to happen. But there are quarterbacks I would have rather see the Bears sign before Andy Dalton. I mean, I wanted Fitzmagic, I guess. You could have got him pretty cheap. You know, I think he had a phenomenal year for the offensive coordinator he had at Miami. You know, the guy's got a great arm. He wins games. He's exciting. He's passionate. I mean, but Andy Dalton, he's not good. But at the same time, do you think I'm surprised? I mean, do you honestly think that I expected the Bears to do something right here? I mean, it'd probably be best for them to get Andy Dalton and fail just so they can change the GM, the president of the team, Ted Thompson, and the coaches out one more time. Unfortunately, you have the McCaskies up there who might be the worst owners in sports history making these decisions. And it's not a reach to say that, by the way, because they took like one of the original football teams with all the histories and the most championships before the Super Bowl era and completely ruined them.
You suck!
I mean, it's not like they're Cleveland, because Cleveland wasn't ever really good. It's not like Cleveland was already ruined. It's not like they're good at one time and were completely ruined by a group of owners over the last 50 years. Owners that know nothing about the sport and won't even learn about it. Owners that probably were gifted the team due to marriage, right? marriage. You know? But at the same time, I don't have that big of expectations for the Chicago Bears. And the reaction to Andy Dalton might be a little bit too much of an overreaction that he's going to absolutely suck. He might not suck. I mean, there's still some upside with him. He's actually thrown for over 4,000 yards twice. I don't think there was a Bears quarterback that ever threw for 4,000 yards. I mean, Jay Cutler did it in Denver before he came to the Bears. But the most he's ever thrown for the Bears was 3,666 yards. No, actually, he had 1 year, 3,812 yards. So, there you go. But, I mean, the most obvious thing for me is that Matt Nagy is an absolute fool when it comes to coaching. Because he didn't even use Mitch right. I think it's quite obvious that Mitch couldn't check down. And what do quarterbacks that have some size and some speed do if they can't check down? Well, they take off running for a chunk of 8 to 15 yards, like Lamar Jackson. You know, even the good quarterbacks that can check down do that, right? I mean, look at Russell Wilson. He'll take off running, but he can check down. Of course, terrible comparison there. But Lamar Jackson is kind of a comparison of what he could have done. But Nagy took away his biggest strength and turned him into something he couldn't be good at. I mean, that's coaching. So I have absolutely zero hope in my mind that Nagy is going to do good with Dalton, because I'm not sure if Nagy can do good with mostly anybody except maybe Tom Brady. You know, Kyler Murray, he's a quarterback that doesn't really check it down that well, but he takes off running, and he did great doing it this year. Their defense was horrible, and they still almost made the playoffs. The Bears only made the playoffs because their schedule was easy, and their defense was pretty good. But that defense is now getting old. They didn't sign Kyle Fuller. They lost a few key guys. Terrible signings in Quinn and letting some good guys go. And that's just all Ryan Pace. So, to be honest with you, if the Bears season win total comes out around 5.5 or 6 or something, I'll probably have to take the over. Because I think they can win 6 or 7 games. Right? I think they can do that. But obviously, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. It's going to have to be rebuilt at some point. That's what I think about the Andy Dalton signing.
That's terrible.
All right, my friends. Let's get into something a lot more positive to talk about, which is the Sweet 16 with Mr. David Bearman. And now I'm very excited to welcome back to the Odds Breakers the deputy editor of sports betting at ESPN and huge Florida Gators fan, Mr. David Bearman from ESPN.com. You can follow him on Twitter at DBearmanESPN. David, we are through the first 2 rounds of the tournament. How's your bracket looking?
Bracket's looking okay. Thanks for having me on. The bracket, I did have a couple of these upsets in there. I'm not going to tell you I'm in first place. I'm probably in about the 80-something percentile and, upper middle of the pack. But, I had LSU beating Michigan, so that kind of hurt. But I also had FSU beating LSU. So if FSU takes care of Michigan, my bracket will be fine. I still have all 4 Final Four teams available. I didn't have Illinois going past the Sweet 16. But I didn't have Oregon State in the Sweet 16 either. So
who did?
There were a bunch of misses. But overall, the bracket is what it is. It's your one-time entry fee that you hope to win. And sometimes you pull it off, like 2 years ago when I had Texas Tech going all the way to the finals and had them at 50-1. So it was an extremely successful March Madness last year. I still have chances. I can see the path to winning the bracket, but I spent a lot of my attention more on the individual games. But my bracket's not destroyed like a lot of people. If you still have all 4 Final Four teams available, and I believe I have 7 of my 8 Sweet 16 teams. I think I might have had Purdue I had Iowa advancing to the Elite 8. I still have 7 alive. So if you can get all 7 in there, you got a shot.
Oh, dude, totally. I mean, for me, I picked the wrong upsets because you're going to pick some upsets, right? Now, from a betting standpoint, did a lot better because we were on teams like Oral Roberts and we laid off some of those fading the Pac-12 teams that some people have been doing. But as far as my bracket, not doing well at place, but I do have 3 of the last Final 4 and the Final 2 and the Final 1 still in, which I have Baylor beating Gonzaga, and I have Florida State in my Final 4. So,
as do I.
There you go. Great minds there. Unfortunately, when Illinois lost, I thought I had a 1 leg up, and I had Oklahoma State going to the Final 4, and then Oregon State came in and said, no, we're not going to let that happen. So
in that case, I have Houston and Arkansas going far as well. So I'm still in good shape, riding Houston and Arkansas as well as Florida State. And if those 3 teams keep advancing, I'll have a shot. I mean, everybody has Gonzaga and Baylor, I assume. But on the bottom half, I will have Florida State. In one bracket, I have Houston, and the other one I have Arkansas. So we still have a chance. I think with Illinois losing, that helped.
Yeah.
The Houston-Arkansas scenario, but we'll see how it works itself out.
Exactly. The fact that we both have Florida State in the Final 4 gives us a leg up. Not a ton of people did it. I think it was like 6%. I can't remember, but that changed every time I looked. But
right.
It was low because, Florida State was a 4 seed, and people don't usually put 4 seeds in. I just was shocked that Oklahoma State and Tennessee both shot less than 33% against Oregon State. So We'll talk a little bit about that game. And just a quick disclaimer, I'm outside recording this with you, so if there is any like dog fights or gang shootings or anything, I'm most likely okay. We're doing some construction in our bathroom. So for the listeners out there, you might hear an airplane buzzing by or something there too. So
all good.
All right. Well, you know what? I got a question for you here. It sounds to me that betting went pretty well for you as well. So what are any systems that you might have incorporated to betting this tournament?
Sure, and I kind of do this every tournament. It's not foolproof by any stretch of the imagination, or we'd be on a beach somewhere in the Caribbean. But I love doing one or two things. Either A, having no action until the favorite gets down early, and then pounding the favorite live, which wouldn't necessarily have been a profitable strategy because a lot of the favorites wound up losing, like Illinois. You would have kept betting them to come back, and that would have been a loss, or Ohio State, etc. And I will admit that I took Ohio State live a couple of times and lost. But on the flip side, what I really, really like to do, and it's a combination of what I just said and the other side, is I like to find a couple of big dogs that I really like. In this case, it was Eastern Washington getting 10.5 versus Kansas, or Iona getting 16.5 versus Alabama. Favorites that I think dogs that I think can stick around and have staying power. And then once they do what you expect them to do and have, be in the game at halftime, I then like to go bet the other side for about a third of what I bet the game for. It acts as a soft hedge if that dog winds up crapping the bed, or you can hit the middle and you have middle opportunities. So anytime you take, let's use the Eastern Washington example. Eastern Washington getting 10.5. I really felt that they could beat Kansas, and I actually picked it in one of my brackets. They have an 8-point lead at halftime. So basically, you took the 10.5. You're up 8. You're basically up 18.5. And if you go and look at the live line at the half, Kansas was money line. You're talking about a 3-seed Kansas who was 10.5-point favorite, who is now a money line pick at the half. And you're thinking to yourself, this is Kansas. This is March. This is Bill Self. Kansas is going to win this game. They're not going to win by more than 10.5 since they're down by 8. So I went ahead and took for a third of my bet, and I took Kansas at money line to win. And you just hope that now you have a 10.5-point window to hit, plus the 8 points you have in hand. So as long as Kansas wins, but wins by less than 10.5, you win both. And in that case, I was able to win both, and I did that 4 times over the weekend. Iona versus Alabama. I had the under in the UCLA second-round game where it was under by 20 points at halftime on average. And so I went ahead and took the over and wound up hitting both because the scoring increased in the second half. So whenever you can, you're basically maximizing the value. Now, you could really, really, really like that dog. You may not want to get off of it. And you may say, okay, well, Oral Roberts is going to beat Ohio State, so don't waste any money on Ohio State. In that case, I did have Oral Roberts. I bet Ohio State at the half, and I bet them again later on, and it didn't work out. You're not going to hit them all. What I love is when you pick the dog and you're right on the dog, especially at halftime, you go ahead and pick the favorite at a small price, much better. You're getting a 3 seed like Kansas at a money line for minus 110. That's hard to pass up because you're pretty sure Kansas is going to come back and win that game.
Exactly. And that means, well, you had an 18-point spread there for, to cover your comeback. So Kansas was probably favored by a second half bet of like 8 or 9 points or something like that. But same way to do
Correct.
is taking the money line because, you're just redoing the spread, but basically saying Kansas is going to win,
right.
Which was kind of perfect for you. So love the way you play that.
And in the Alabama case, Iona was down by 1 at the half, so you didn't have as big of a spread. You're getting 16.5 points. The Alabama second half line was 11.5, and you had a 5-point window, and they were only down 1, and I was able to, middle that where Alabama hit a 3-pointer with like 30 seconds to go to go up 12.
That was close. Wow. That was really close.
It was really close. It was going between 10 and 12 almost the entire last 10 minutes of the game, and then the final shot was the one that got in, and then Iona missed their 3-pointer, and you win. It doesn't always work that way, and Purdue's another situation versus North Texas. I had Purdue going far in my bracket. Purdue was down all game. I kept hitting them live, and it never happened. I had them in the survivor pool, and that lost as well. So you're not going to win them all. And even though I'm proud of profiting about 8 units during the first weekend of the tournament and having a bracket that's still alive, I did lose both my survivor teams, thinking that Purdue and Tennessee would at least win their first games. And with Survivor, I tend to pick teams early that I don't want to use ever again. And Purdue and Tennessee and those type of teams fit the perfect mold of pick them early and then don't think about them the rest of the way. Unfortunately, they didn't get out of their own first round. So win some, lose some, but exciting first 2 days of the tournament. And, we just posted a few minutes on Chalk, the updated lines and action reports for the Sweet 16 game. And tomorrow we will have our best bets from our daily wager crew on all 8 games for the weekend.
Great stuff, man. And make sure you guys check out ESPN Chalk for all of your sports betting and Sweet 16 information. Let's get into a few games then, my man. Oregon State versus Loyola. And I wrote minus 6.5, total about 125.5. David, are you going to play anything on this game?
I am. I'm going to actually be playing Loyola. I think they're a lot better than people think they are. They shouldn't have been an 8 seed. This is a team that had made the Final Four a couple of years ago, and everybody assumed it was just because they had the divine intervention of Sister Jean. But they're a good squad. Lots of senior leadership. Now they have experience in the tourney, and people close to the NCAA basketball world have said that this team is better than the Final Four team of a couple of years ago. And I did not necessarily expect them to go wire to wire and beating the crap out of one of the top 4 teams in the country. But they didn't just hang around and skate by Illinois. They dominated all 40 minutes. This is a Final Four caliber team, make no bones about it. The bracket opened up a bit with them getting to face Oregon State, which is just weird that you get to face a 12 seed after facing a 1 seed. But keep in mind, this is the same Oregon State team who was losing to awful teams earlier in this year. I know they're hot. They've won 5 straight games, all as an underdog, and they're one of 5 teams in the last 25 years to win 5 consecutive games from conference and NCAA tournament. A lot of the tickets and the money is already being pounded on Oregon State because you don't want to take the little guy minus the touchdown. But in this case, I think Loyola is they can go out there and pound Illinois. I think they can beat Oregon State. And at some point, the magic's going to wear off for an Oregon State team that isn't good. Let's call it what it is. I mean, they're an underrated Pac-12 team, just like all the Pac-12 was underrated. They were misseeded. But at the end of the day, Loyola Chicago is the better team. I may not lay the 6.5. I may play the under because both have very, very good defensive teams. Loyola Chicago is one of the top defensive teams in the country, as you saw versus Illinois. So I probably play the under before I play anything, but the number is 125.5, which all it takes is one hot streak for that number to disappear. But I really like what Porter Moser's team has done. They're 6-1 against the spread and outright as a dog in this tournament. I know that they're a favorite in this one, but that's a good squad. So I lean Loyola and I lean under in this game.
All right. Well, so you're not going to play it necessarily. You're still thinking about it.
I'm still thinking about it. I'd love to take dogs in this tournament, and Loyola Chicago is not a dog, and they're a small little team, but I just think they're really, really good.
No, they are, and they're
really, really good.
They have a ton of talent, and I was shocked because I was kind of like their talent can't match up, and it wasn't the Illinois game that I realized, it was the Georgia Tech game, and then that's why I pounded Loyola plus 7.5 against Illinois. What we did find out about the Pac-12 is, let's be honest, their top teams are just as good as the Big Ten's top teams. They're just as good as the Big East 2 top teams. They're just as good as the SEC's top teams, in my opinion. So the Pac-12 got a lot of crap when Oregon State did win the tournament, and especially, people were already down on them, so they got really down on them, and I think the people who were fading Pac-12 probably lost. But what I will say is Oregon State's still the biggest regression candidate. This is a team that lost to Portland, right? Just like you mentioned. I mean, they've been playing out of their minds, but when does it stop? What I see with Loyola is that they actually do have the same types of talent as some of these teams in the SEC and the Big Ten. That's what I see with Loyola. And Krutwig is just an amazing basketball player. He's very coordinated inside. His little hook shot's going in. He's been kind of like that all year. So what I will say, though, on the West Coast, since we got Gonzaga, we're better than the East Coast here in basketball there, David. So my apologies, but I think it's a West Coast type of year.
I would say that by and large, over all of the major basketball and footballs, that for the most part, there's apps. It is what it is with all media markets. There's an East Coast bias. Everyone's not staying up late at night. The majority of the population hasn't seen Oregon State play at all. Even if you're into championship week, Oregon State's playing at 10, 11 o'clock at night. So I think the Pac-12 in both football and basketball is perennially underrated, but the football squads tend to prove the point by the end of the year by getting wiped out during bowl season or beating each other up and having nobody in the playoff for all but 1 year. But in basketball, these teams, I'm not going to go so far as to hop on the Bill Walton train and Conference of Champions and yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, I'm not sure any of these Pac-12 teams are going to win the NCAA tournament. But the fact that they got 5 teams into the Sweet 16 and in dominating fashion, all of them have covered the spread in every single game. They're like a bettor's dream. If you had been betting only Pac-12 since the beginning here, you could retire off of it. I'm just not sure it's going to translate into the Sweet 16 when you get into much tougher matchups. Oregon State is not as good as Loyola Chicago, and I think that they're going to lose that one. Further down the line, you see some of the other, 2 of them are playing each other, obviously, in USC and Oregon. UCLA is up against a really good Alabama team. Someone's going to lose the Oregon-USC game. So you're going to see some Pac-12 teams fall this weekend. You just don't know how many.
Exactly, but at least they're guaranteed one in the Elite Eight. So I will say that. Right. And I do have this score 65-58. So that's 123 points. Lean to the under and lean to Loyola. Let's move on to the next one, Nova versus Baylor. About 6.5. I think it's 7 now. Baylor's favored. Total on this is 140. I'm just going to get right into this. Baylor has been playing very good ball, and they're to the same form that they started it with when they beat Illinois by 13 points in the non-conference, when they were rolling through the Big 12, beating the best teams by double digits. I see this in them. But at the same time, Wisconsin did have their opportunities to score, and they just missed shots. Nova's playing a little bit out of their minds, too. They're taking a lot of threes. They've had a very easy run to the Sweet 16. They played Winthrop and they played North Texas, and we knew North Texas was fake, and Purdue just couldn't hit the broadside of a barn that day. Here's the thing. Nova doesn't turn over the ball much, but Baylor ranks 3rd in forcing turnovers, and that's part of the reason why they score points. But Baylor also plays at a really fast pace, man, and Nova is playing desperate. Nova without Gillespie, it's probably going to happen. I'm gonna lean Baylor with the points, but I think the over is live here because I think you're just going to see a lot of points in this game, and I figured it out to be way off. I figured it out to be 79-70, or a total of 149. So my biggest play is the over in this game. What are your thoughts?
I do like the over here. I didn't have it as high as you have, but that gives me more confidence there. This is one of those where you're trying to window dress here, and if you look at what we thought of these two teams 10 days ago, you would say, well, Baylor, was one of the best teams in the country, but after the COVID scare where they shut it down for 2 weeks, they came back and they played like crap, lost a few games, had a rally in a few games, lost in the Big 12 tournament. They're not the same Baylor of old. Villanova, contending team at the beginning of the year, playing well, in contention for a 1 seed, injury to their top guy in Gillespie, hit the crapper, lost 2 consecutive games, didn't look great in the Big East tournament. People are like, Villanova, they have no shot. We're going to pick them to lose to Winthrop, which is what 58% of the country did, which was astounding. I went the other way because it was just obvious to bet against the public in that one. These two teams have done the opposite since, of what we were thinking of them once the tournament started. Baylor returned to the Baylor of the beginning of the year, dominating teams, running teams out of the gym, up and down, up and down, up and down. Villanova has looked very impressive, but like you mentioned, they played a 12 seed, they played a 13 seed, they played 2 not very good teams. So I'm not really sure that what we've seen out of Villanova is real, but what we've seen out of Baylor is real. Still 2 really good TA teams, 2 really good coaches, 2 teams that were thought to be in the top 10 when the season started. One stayed there, one did not. I just don't trust Nova without Gillespie. I think it's buyers beware when you saw what Villanova did the first 2 games. Very impressive against 2 not good teams. The money and the tickets show a lot of money on Baylor. All the tickets are on Baylor. That being said, this Villanova team over the course of the years has not been an underdog a lot, but when they have been, they've been very, very successful as an underdog, going 9-3-1 against the spread in the last 5 seasons. Again, not that many chances to do that, but when they do, Jay Wright has his team ready. They haven't been an underdog yet this season, if you can imagine that. Obviously, in the Big East, you would think maybe versus Creighton, maybe versus someone, but they have not been. So we'll see what happens, but I'm going to lean Baylor as well because at the end of the day, 6.5 or 7 is one scoring spurt away from covering, and we all know Baylor can do that. These teams at this level, and when it comes to upsets, I like to play them in the first couple of rounds, but once it gets to the Sweet 16, usually the cream rises to the crop. Obviously, there are exceptions. You have runs by Butler and VCU and even Loyola Chicago a few years ago. But at the end of the day, it's the 1 seeds that beat the 4 and 5 seeds in this round. Once the 1 seeds get past the upsets of the second round, they tend to do fairly well in the Sweet 16, and I think Baylor comes out on top on this one.
All right, and one thing I will say about all the public jumping on Baylor, and when I say public, these are early bettors, so it's not necessarily public-type people that bet before the game, but a little bit of a sharper bettor. Baylor only ranks about 200 in free throws, and I'm concerned for Foul City here if that happens, laying a big number like 7. So I might use Baylor in a money line parlay with another team, maybe a Loyola, maybe it'd be, like a Arkansas or probably not Gonzaga. That's a little too high, but I'll figure that one out a little later. So we're on the same side, and one thing I will say is you're thinking about coming back on the under. Maybe you do, but do it for less because I've seen Baylor score until the last second when they're blowing out teams. So just keep that in mind that you might want to hedge and eliminate some of your risk, go for a middle. Just remember Baylor will keep scoring. Next game, Oral Roberts versus Arkansas. Arkansas is laying about 11.5 points. Total is 159 here. I'll let you go first.
I'm not really in the business of laying double-digit points this late in the tournament. It's very rare that you have a team up double digits, especially a 3 seed, because they're usually playing a 2 seed or different. I do think Arkansas wins this game, and that Oral Roberts, the Cinderella shoe, will eventually fall off. We are talking about a 15 seed who obviously dominated Ohio State for the most part, hung in there. But they didn't dominate Florida. And I'm not saying that because I went to Florida. I'm saying that because I watched the game. Florida controlled it from the onset, had a double-digit lead with 10 minutes to go, and then Florida decided, for a completely different podcast, Florida decided to switch their strategy up, slow down the game, and made a lot of mistakes late and allowed Oral Roberts to come back in. And I'm not taking any credit away from Oral Roberts. They've beaten a 2 seed and a 7 seed back-to-back, 2 teams with championship pedigrees. I do think it comes to an end, but because I don't want to lay the double digits, I'm actually going to look at this game exactly with what you and I started this conversation about in terms of looking at the dog, and then once the dog gets ahead, then going ahead and jumping on Arkansas. I think Oral Roberts has the tools to get out to a lead. I might even play them in the first half because Arkansas may, just look at a 15 seed and come out and not have the foot on the gas, so to speak. Oral Roberts hangs around early, maybe even has a lead. Keep in mind, Arkansas was getting blown out the door by in their last game before they came back. So I actually think that Arkansas would provide a good live spot to jump in, assuming Oral Roberts gets ahead early. You can probably get Arkansas at cheaper than 11 and a half. I'm hoping that maybe this is the way I'm going to play this game. Maybe at about the 12 or 8 minute timeout, Oral Roberts has a 1 or 2 point lead. If you're lucky, a 5 or 6 point lead, and you can get Arkansas maybe at 3 or 4, hop on them at hey, I got Arkansas minus 3.5, 4.5, and get a better value than 11. It's not, there's no value in taking a 3 seed at minus 11 in the Sweet 16 against a team that has proven they can upset a number 2 seed Ohio State and a Florida team that hung with Arkansas all year. Not much of a difference between the two. Can Oral Roberts win? Sure, they're in the Sweet 16 already. I just think the wheels fall off here, but hopefully they get out to a lead so you can jump on Arkansas live is the way I'm going to play this one.
All right. Well, for me, I must say it's nicer to lose to Baylor than to Oral Roberts. So at least my Badgers can one-up you on that one.
Yeah, that's true.
and that's what I said when we got seeded. I knew we were a fraudulent team anyway, and the way we finished the season, I'm like, hey, I'm really happy we're a 8 or 9 seed because now we get to play the best team and lose to them instead of like Norfolk State or something, right? So, so for me, I was actually kind of happy. But what I will say is Oral Roberts won the turnover margin against Ohio State 16-6. Plus 10, plus Ohio State missed a ton of free throws. And Florida, they won the turnover margin 20-12. I don't even think they played that well, and both games went to overtime. I'm going to wait till the public jumps on Oral Roberts because I think they're going to be a public dog, and I'm going to consider laying the wood with Arkansas. They're a better shooting team in a tougher conference. These teams played already once this year. Arkansas won by 11, but Arkansas knows this is more important here. This could be the one that Oral Roberts gets shut down. What I do lean to is the under. Okay, because this could go a couple different ways to hit the under the way I see it. Arkansas massively steps up their defense. They win by 20 and the under hits because they, slow it down at the end. Or, Arkansas comes out so cold in the first half, like you said, the score might be close, but it might not be that big. And I just see more defense. So I'm just telling you, I'm going to lean to the under. Syracuse versus Houston. Houston's about -6. The total is 140. What do you have on this one?
Oh, it's hard to bet against Syracuse. Jimmy Boeheim, they know how to win as underdogs. They have more wins as dogs, more wins as a double-digit team than any team in the history of the tournament. I don't think they're that good, and I know I'm going to get crushed by friends of mine who went to Syracuse. They're an 11 seed for a reason, but I don't like picking against them. Houston, they worried me last week getting down, and obviously they had to come back and steal it at the end there. They probably should have lost in the last round. This is going to be a pass for me unless I like to jump in and see something that I like live. It's just very hard to pick against Syracuse at any point in time because they have a coach that knows how to get it done in the tournament. Their zone is something that is perfect for this event because you haven't seen it all year unless you're in the conference and you're obviously not playing your own conference. So Houston may struggle with the zone. Ultimately, Houston, I have them going to the Elite Eight, and in one bracket I have them in the Final Four. So I see them winning it, but picking against Syracuse is not a model for success if you're trying to win money. They've won 17 games as an underdog. Think about that for a minute. There are probably 2/3 of the school in this country who have never played 17 games in the tournament, period. And they've won 17 games as an underdog under Jimmy Boeheim, the most by any team since the tournament expanded in 85. So they're an underdog again. They're getting 6. If I play a side, it's going to be Syracuse because, again, you're going to get the points with a team that knows how to play this well. Historically, they're one of the best cover teams in the country this year, not just as a dog. So I would play Syracuse, and then I probably, if Syracuse got out to the lead, I probably wouldn't even jump on Houston because if they get the lead on Houston, that means Houston's struggling against the zone, and that's not going to change. And if you've noticed, both games that Syracuse has won so far, they got out to early leads, and they were never threatened. They're one of the few teams who has yet to be threatened in this tournament at all. When teams struggle with them, teams usually lose against them. So I would advise people to resist the temptation of jumping in on Houston during the game because, like I said, they get off to a slow start. It ain't going to get any better. Now, could they come out and defeat the zone right off the bat and blow Syracuse out of the water? Absolutely. Houston has beaten everybody this year. They only have 3 losses on the season. It's just not a game I'm looking at playing, but if I were to pick a side, it would be Syracuse.
So, great points. And Boeheim's ATS record is fantastic in this, right? So, for me, this might be a good thing that Houston had such a scare against Rutgers because maybe they play a much bigger game the next time. You saw that against Memphis, and it was so close, and then all of a sudden they just blow out Cincinnati. If Houston's on and they find a weakness, they can do that. Syracuse is just too hot and cold for me all season for me to back or fade them in this position. Even though my numbers is Houston -8, I don't even know if I'd lean them that much. I think the under could hit in a couple different situations, so I'll take a peek at that. I'm going to consider it. I'm wondering how much more it goes up. So, that's all I have to say about this game. Let's move on to some Sunday games then.
At least you're honest.
Hey, I'm honest, and we don't have a ton of time, so I wanted to move on because this is a better game because me and you both have Florida State advancing in this round, and at Michigan. They stepped it up against LSU. LSU took a ton of jump shots, missed a few too many. And Michigan's still without Livers, and I expect him not to play. But I'm really looking forward to this. I think Michigan finishing the season, losing 3 of their last 5 games is a red flag. I think their style of basketball is great. It's controlled, and they have playmakers. But they haven't faced a team with this height. And I think that's where it's going to get them because the forwards aren't that good in the Big Ten, in my opinion. I think it's really center heavy and guard heavy. Well, Hunter Dickinson and Franz Wagner could struggle against those tall guys at Florida State, in my opinion. Florida State's also fast paced. They do turn the ball over a lot, but Michigan doesn't force turnovers, ranking 337th on defensive, forcing only 14% of possessions to turn. So, yeah, the way I look at this game is this should be closer to a pick 'em. So, I know it's floating between 2.5 and 3, and I did grab an early 3. But Leonard Hamilton is 7-2 against the spread as a dog with 5 outright wins, and I did get that from Felica. He did tweet that out earlier this week, and I mean that's just a good coach when he's a dog. This is Florida State for me, and especially if Livers doesn't play, when does that kind of come in? So,
yeah. I agree with you here. I mean, I took Florida State to beat LSU and LSU to beat Michigan, so that's where it's where I'm at with these two teams. Michigan actually surprised me the other night without Livers and coming back and rallying against LSU multiple times, and then just putting the hammer to them at the end and even covering the spread when I was all over LSU moneyline LSU game, and I thought I was right. I handicapped it right there. LSU was leading the majority of the game, and then Michigan flipped the switch, which championship teams can do, and there's part of me worried that Michigan finally figured it out without one of their top players and that they're going to make the run that everybody expected them to make before he got injured. Sure. But I also think Florida State is just as good. I was hoping this would be closer to 4.5, 5. I'm still going to take the 2.5, 3 with Florida State. I have them in the Final Four for a reason. They have height. They can run. That they didn't play very well in their first game. It was another one of those windows that you can go ahead and get late because Florida State wasn't playing well. They looked extremely well in their second game. I was all over that. I was actually surprised to see them as a dog in some places in that second round game. I thought that was a spread that was just off, that people got all over the Colorado love for some reason, maybe because it was the Pac-12. I don't know what it was, but people were all over it. I do like Florida State here. I'm not going to be surprised if it winds up, all right, you lost to the number 1 seed, one of the top teams in the country, because to be honest, I went into the bracket thinking Michigan was going to be the team that I was going to win the whole thing. And then I saw their bracket and I said, they ain't getting out of this region. And Florida State was one of the reasons why.
Yeah, Florida State and their injury to Livers and the fact that Juwan Howard is kind of new to this. So those are the 3 things that affected my opinion at this bracket as well. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about Creighton versus Gonzaga, bud. Biggest spread in an Elite 8 game for a long time. 13.5 total, 158.5. What do you have on the Zags?
I'm all over Gonzaga on this one. They're the best team in the country. And whereas I said pre-tournament that if you had Gonzaga and Baylor versus the field, I would take the field only because you're getting 66 teams versus 2 teams. At this point, if you gave me Gonzaga and Baylor versus the field with 16 teams left, I would lean towards Gonzaga and Baylor. They have proven they're the best teams in the country. I'm not high on Creighton. I haven't been high on Creighton all year. Blown out the door in the Big East tournament championship versus Georgetown. I know that they won impressively the other day, again, versus a weaker team. They should not have beaten UCSB to start the tournament. They should have lost that game. Beating Ohio was a nice rebound for them, but Ohio is not the strongest team in the world. I like Gonzaga in this game. It is a big number, but if there's any team in the country that I'm willing to lay the number with, it is the Zags. Team's on a mission, has a chip on its shoulder. We're the little guy. We're going to prove it. We're going to try to go undefeated. Not sure they make it all the way, but when I looked at the two brackets when this came out, I loved Gonzaga's bracket to get to the Final Four, and I absolutely hated Michigan's bracket, and I'm still going to stay that way. I think Gonzaga wins this and wins this easily. And if they don't get out to a good start, I'm absolutely going to jump all over them like I did in the second round game when they were losing earlier to Oklahoma. There was a really, really good opportunity to jump on Gonzaga live. I'm going to lay it early. I'm going to take the Zags. I just don't think Creighton has what it takes to win this game. They're good, not great. They were better last year before, unfortunately, COVID ended their chances at being a top 2 seed. But I think Gonzaga coasts in this one.
All right, man. So I agree. I have Zags winning 91-76. And I think I'm low on their score because their games are statistically final at about 5 minutes left and they run the clock out at times. And they're still scoring 90 points. I don't know how they not score over 90 points here when they're playing a Creighton team that ranks 42nd at 16.1 seconds per possession. And the Zags rank second in seconds per possession in the entire NCAA. So I think Creighton gets to 70. I mean, I think that this over is way too low. Yeah, I think that I'm going to take a team total on the Zags over what it's going to be about 87. Unless this total goes up, it's going to be about 87. And I think it's also the Zags are probably going to, at least get up to 90, 95 points here. And I think Creighton's going to get some points at the end anyway. And if Creighton covers, this is just going to be that much easier for me. It's over. When you see a big number, a lot of people get scared of the over. Well, maybe an Oral Roberts game, I'll be scared of the over. But when it's two of the most efficient offenses going against each other, like Creighton and the Zags, and the speed, no problem whatsoever. I think this is going to be
you had a few of those instances in the second round where the number was high, and you're like, well, how can you take it the over 155.5, and it wound up being 85 at halftime, and you're already almost there. So I do agree with you on that. I actually like your Gonzaga team total play, and here's a scary stat that I heard on CBS's broadcast or whatever channel this particular game was on over the weekend. Gonzaga in Oklahoma game finished at 49.1% field goal shooting. That's their lowest of the season. Think about that for a minute. They shot 49%, and that was their worst of the season, and they still covered the spread.
Did you say 49?
49%. And they said that was their lowest of the season, and they won by double digits. That's how good this Gonzaga team is.
Exactly. And this feels like that Creighton. Here's the thing. It's also in Hinkle Fieldhouse where Creighton plays, right? They play against Butler there a lot, a couple times a year. Well, one time a year minimum, and I guess if they have the tournament there. So it's literally in their backyard. They understand it, and that's might be the only reason I'm not taking the Zags at minus 13.5, but the over is definitely money on both sides of the coin. Let's move on to the next one. Oregon versus USC. USC's minus 2.5. Total on this is 139. And I'll quick go first. These two coaches, man, Dana Altman, 15-5-1 against the spread. Andy Enfield, 9-0 against the spread in this NCAA tournament. Both of these stats are since 2006. I don't want to bet against either of these, but I think this spread is pretty close to perfect, man, because Oregon didn't have some of their guys throughout the year, so their stats are actually a little bit better. These teams played each other once, and maybe Oregon puts the pressure on USC like they did against Iowa. So, USC, I have a ticket on them at 50-1. I can't hedge it because they're going to be too big of a dog against Gonzaga. I hope they win. But this minus 2.5 just makes me, I think it's I would set it at 2.5. And this is exactly where I'd set that line. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. This is a pass for me right now. We'll see what happens before this game starts. I was basically going to hit on the exact same thing you hit on, that these are two coaches that you don't want to bet against. Altman 16-4 ATS in the tournament at Oregon, including 4-0 in this particular round. Andy Enfield has not failed to cover in any game that he's been a head coach on in this tournament. So two of the more impressive coaches in the country that you don't want to bet against. I think Oregon is the more talented team, and you're getting points with them. So if I had a lean based on watching Oregon go up and down the court last week in their 7-2 game, I like them. If I were to pick a side, it would be that. I would also lean to the over a little bit, not high, but I would lean a little bit just because I don't think that number is very high. But Oregon is as impressive as they come in their last game.
Oh, there you go. And so, and I guess if I had a slight lean, it would be Oregon as well, just because you're getting points here. Last game, UCLA versus Alabama. Alabama minus 6.5. Total is 145. God, Alabama has to do this to us in football every year, and now it's basketball. Oh my God, I'm gonna puke, man.
Yeah, I mean, as a Florida guy who is the lone school to ever hold the football and basketball trophies at the same time, you just hope that someone tells Alabama there's no room on that mantle for them. I do think they're the better team here, and you have a really good Pac-12 team that's getting a lot of points. I have UCLA in a capture pool, so I'm going to be rooting for UCLA to cover anyway, so I can continue on in the pool, whether it's with them or capturing Alabama, which, as painful as that sounds. But, I'm a guy who went to Florida and has picked Florida State and Bama throughout. It's painful to watch, painful to do. But with this one, I would lean Alabama again. They're very explosive. They're very good. It's a very, very good squad that absolutely could be cutting down the nets in a few weeks.
I mean, what would this spread have been a week ago? 8, 10, I mean, the perception has went up on the Pac-12, and I do agree with it. But I mean, it might get a little bit out of hand here. I mean, Alabama is just a fast-playing team, and you don't want to bet against them when they're efficient. They can hit threes. I mean, Nate Oates is doing a fantastic job. I was screaming to hire Nate Oates instead of Gard. So I'm sorry, as a Badger fan, I really wanted him when he was at Buffalo, but. I mean, what can I say? UCLA, easy road to the Sweet 16. Overrated BYU team, then Abilene Christian. Lucky for them, man. But I don't think they're that great of a team. They lost a few key players throughout the season. I do have Alabama by 7, so I'm going to give it a lean. But I'm going to consider playing this one seriously. This is one I'm going to consider, and I think the Bama could blow them out. Sometimes when you look at these games, David, you got to think, well, I can see a margin. I can see Alabama winning from 5 to 18 points, right? And so you think about, well, the spread's 6.5. I think if I'm right about this, there's a lot more margin of error on winning this if I'm betting that side, because I just don't see UCLA even covering, even be within 5, right? So
and that would be the right side to pick if that's your thoughts on the game, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I'm contemplating here, but we'll see how the rest goes. I know you got to run, grab the kiddos, man, but where could our listeners find your great information for the Sweet 16?
ESPN Chalk. We have our opening line, current line, statistical notes, tickets, and money piece that's up right now on Chalk, and tomorrow morning should be no later than my kids putting their shoes on at 8:45 in the morning. Maybe even earlier, we will have our best bets from Doug Kazarian, Joe Fortenbaugh, Chris the Bear Felica, and our cast of thousands. We'll have our daily wager best bets out tomorrow on Chalk.
All right, great stuff. Make sure you guys check out ESPN Chalk for your primer for the Sweet 16. Thanks for coming on, David.
Thank you.
All right, my friends. Now it's time for a little UFC 250. And going solo here, just going to talk about the main event because I think I have a play on it. Francis Ngannou is at about minus 125, and Stipe Miocic is at about plus 105 here. Now, this fight is going to be fantastic. I'm not sure if I'm going to be around. I have some friends in town. I'm going to try to talk them into watching this, but that doesn't always go well. Either way, I think that Francis is going to win this fight. And I know he's at about a minus 125. But here's the deal. I think he's been the best heavyweight. And yes, he did lose to Stipe in a decision. And Stipe fought a magnificent fight. He then lost to Derek Lewis in a decision. Kind of had a lull in his 2018. And then he beats Blades in the first round with a TKO. Then he beats Cain Velasquez in the first round, 26 seconds with a KO. Then he beats Junior Dos Santos in the first round with a TKO. And Jorginho Rosenstruck he beats in 20 seconds. So, I mean, he's gotten better, right? And I think he's the best fighter in the UFC right now. Well, in the heavyweight division for sure. So, I mean, in my opinion, he's probably going to win this, but I really like Stipe too as a fighter. Stipe, his only loss was to Cormier. He actually fought Cormier, if you remember, 3 times in a row. He lost by KO, and then he beats Cormier in the 4th round for a TKO, and then it goes all the way to decision with Cormier's eye being hurt. And a couple months ago, well, more than 6 months ago or so in August when we talked about that fight. That was a fantastic fight. But Stipe is the better all-around fighter, and he's got better numbers, and he's better at taking down. But Francis is just a beast, an absolute beast. He's a pure athlete. And this, I think Stipe can get in a little trouble. I can see that Francis probably wins a little early, too. He's going to go for it pretty early. Now, if this fight does go far into the distance, then if there was a live betting situation, I would consider Stipe. But right now, I just think there's some value on Francis all the way up to minus 150. I'm going to take Francis at minus 125 for 2 stars, and it's going to be a great main event.
Well, I've been with the best, and I beat the best. I've retired more men than Social Security.
All right, my friends, I'm not going to discuss sharp money on the NCAA tournament because we did that yesterday and the percentages hasn't moved that much. It's going to move probably a lot more on Saturday itself. But I will not let you leave this podcast without a bow to the gambling gods parlay. And we missed ours by 1 last week. Purdue on the money line at minus 300 was the thing that blew it. And that game went overtime. And I must admit, I did hedge a little bit on that because I could have. And it was easy because, with North Texas, that game was pretty close. And it was frustrating because it would have been a nice one. But either way, we got a big one for you. We're going to go Oregon State versus Loyola. We're going to take Loyola minus 280 on the money line. We're going to go Nova versus Baylor over 141.5. We're going to go Oral Roberts versus Arkansas under 159. We're going to go Creighton versus Gonzaga over 158.5. And UCLA versus Alabama, we'll take Alabama minus 6.5. This parlay pays at about 17 or 18 to 1, depending upon the prices that you get on these moneyline parts of the parlay.
Kip, I reckon you know a lot about cyberspace. You ever come across anything like time travel?
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, everyone. If you have any other games in the NIT or the CBI that you'd like us to break down for you, please tweet us at the Odds Breakers. Please watch our show on Friday. Should be at about 1 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Eastern. I believe we're going to have 2 shows on Better Odds Sports Betting with Kyle Hunter and a couple awesome guests. So check that out on Friday. Have a blast watching the Sweet 16 and go get some winners.